welcome and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and TechAdvice.Life video. I'm joined today by Dr. Brandon Gien. He is the founder and CEO of Good Design Australia, the chair of Australia's annual Good Design Awards, and a President-Emeritus of the World Design Association. Welcome again to the program.
Thanks, Alex. Really nice to be with you.
Now, it's been at least a couple of years since we last spoke, and we're now in the 2020s. It's been since last decade since we last spoke. Now, each decade has its own design flair. I remember the 70s look ultra futuristic, and then, in my mind at least, there seemed to be a bit of resurgence of that in the early 2000s. So what are your thoughts on that, and what do you see as the major trends to emerge throughout the 2020s?
I think the most obvious trend, if you like, that's coming out is using much more sustainable materials.
Absolutely,
in design. Yeah. That's something that maybe 5 years ago was kind of like a trend, but you're sort of seeing a lot more emphasis on that, and I think that's a great thing.
It is, yeah.
Consumers are actually paying much more attention to sustainability, and I'm seeing a lot of that, right through from architectural projects that have got a sustainability angle to them, through to our product design category that we get in the awards. There's always a beautiful little sustainability message there, and sometimes they are quite big, and even the ones that are at least trying to edge into the right direction. I think that's a worthy trend, and I hope it's not really a trend. I hope it's actually becomes a mainstay of all design. It really should be.
Before we had plastic, everything was in glass or in wood, and then plastic came along, and plastic took over the world. But we know how it's choking the oceans. We know how it's causing all sorts of problems.
Plastic is, it's a designer's best friend. We figured out how to injection mold plastic, and all of a sudden it gave birth to all these incredible products. It was sort of an infinite number of things that you can make with plastic. But it's only now that we sort of look back going, wow, what have we done? We didn't quite think of the sustainability impacts of a material like plastic that takes hundreds, if not thousands, of years to decompose. We know, just looking at the amount of plastic that's now sitting in our oceans, that's a really, really scary thing. And I call that a massive design problem. We've got to try and figure out a way to be more sustainable in the materials that we use, and rather than suggesting that a product should be made from virgin plastic, which is new plastic, we should look at how do we use existing plastic that may be recycled. These spectacles I'm wearing are a really good example. A company called DRESDEN, really, really beautiful design story, but they actually use recycled plastic from various different sources, whether it comes from the ocean or just plain recycled plastic to make a thing like spectacles. So for me, that's nice. It's functional. It does what it needs to do, but there's also a nice sustainability message to it as well. I think that's something that all designers really should be focusing on more. But rather than digging the resources out of the ground, there's an abundance of material. You don't need to go and dig it up.
Just need to know how to repurpose it.
You mentioned nylon. It's a fantastic product called Net Effect. It's actually a carpet manufacturer, Interface. They're based in the US. They discovered a major problem as well, which is discarded fishing nets. So big commercial, fishing trawlers, when their nets actually, get to a point and break, some of them don't do the right thing and actually just cut their nets. They drop to the ocean floor. Now you can imagine the damage that does to our ocean floor in terms of not only getting tangled around reefs, but what it does for fish. These guys developed a whole systematic way of harvesting those nets. This resource sitting there, this waste. Exactly, digging that up and turning it into commercial carpet tiles.
Incredible.
Why? Because nets actually have an incredibly high content of nylon, and nylon is good for carpets. So they're doing good for the environment. They're getting their material, they're digging it out of the ocean,
as a
and they're turning it into a beautiful, commercially successful product. That's what we need more of. That sort of thing I love, and that's all design. It's not just the product, but it's the whole systems design approach to solving a problem like that.
The start of the 2020s has been remarkable in so many ways. I mean, we're barely, a couple more days will be in March, the third month of the first year of the 2020s, and we've had smoke from bushfires, choking smoke, incredible rain just after amazing droughts. We've had massive floods, and of course we have the coronavirus threat that is now stalking humanity across the planet. So how can the principles of good design produce better protective clothing and masks? How can good design improve the way quarantines are conducted? And how can good design make humanity better at dealing with these incredible crises?
Geez, you ask pretty hairy questions. I mean, look, I think the important thing to note is that design's not the silver bullet. It's not going to solve, all the problems of the world.
Yeah.
But a design mindset, as in looking at the problem through the lens of design, really allows you to see the problem in a different perspective. One of the really critical things in the design process is empathy, just as an example. And empathy is so important. If you're designing a wheelchair for someone who's who can't walk, you can't do that by doing a bunch of research and sitting behind your desk and going, voila, we have a wheelchair.
Yeah, a few CAD drawings.
You need to jump into that person's shoes. You need to live and breathe what it's like to not be able to walk and to be in a wheelchair 24/7. To understand what it's like to wheel yourself up a ramp if it's if it's too steep, and so empathy is critical. If you're designing a toothbrush, if you're designing a motor car, you're designing a face mask that's going to protect you from the coronavirus or from the bushfires and the smoke that we've had here in Sydney, and I think that idea of empathy can be applied to the whole world as well. At the end of the day, we're all designing and consuming as human beings. So that's one little thing that I think I'd throw out there and say, design just allows you to understand who you are trying to solve that problem for, and being a little bit more empathetic about that, and really understanding at the end of the day, there's a human being at the end of it, or the end of that process and of that product or that service, and just being really conscious about how you go about doing that.
One of the things I read about just recently was the masks. They cover your face. It doesn't look like you. You look like you've come out of a theatre. And so somebody had the clever idea of taking a photo of the bottom part of your face and printing it on a mask. And the articles were talking about how that would allow you to unlock your phone with what looked like you. I don't think it would work on an iPhone where they're using 30,000 infrared dots and measuring aspects of your face. So it might fool some of the phones that just take a photograph, but still it's a good idea. And I guess that's one of the ways that thinking about something for end users is changing. I think we were discussing it before. It shifts the mask from being something to do with medical to something to do with fashion.
Yeah. And look, I hope we don't get to a point where every single person down the street's wearing a face mask.
Hopefully not, yes.
The coronavirus is at a point now where everyone's a little bit afraid of where it is going to go. But if that is the case, that's a role for design to say, well, how can we again be more empathetic towards that problem? We don't want everyone walking around like they've walked out of a hospital. So is it something that is actually a bit more considered?
Yeah.
Does it turn into a bit of a fashion item? First and foremost, it's got to be functional. If you're just wearing this thing and it's uncomfortable, you end up taking it off.
Yeah.
So designers have to tap into all those parameters and go, right, how do we design something that's functional, that's desirable, that's economical, it's got to be
effective.
It's got to be effective and hopefully also sustainable. So I think I always have the opinion that if a designer or someone with a design mindset is sitting at a table where these big problems are discussed, they just bring a different point of view, and that's important. They're never going to solve the problems, but it's just let's look at the problem from a different perspective. And I think that's what design is really good at.
Yeah, as we were just saying. Now, 2020 also sees the next annual Good Design Awards. So how many years have the awards been around? And what are the deadlines, and what is your message to this year's entrants?
The awards have been around since 1958.
Wow.
So 2018 we had our big 60th anniversary at the Sydney Opera House, which was a beautiful event. So we're going into the 62nd year of these awards, one of the oldest in the world, which we're very proud of. And it's going to be another year filled with incredible projects. We had a peek behind the scenes, and there's quite a few really cool things that are coming through. The diversity of the awards, I think, is one of the things that we also are very proud of. It's everything from architectural design to product design, and under product design there's motor cars and boats and kettles and toasters and consumer electronics, and I mean I think that's the thing that's so fantastic about the awards. You know, you do get just an incredible array of design innovations.
And it's global. It's not just for Australia.
It is, yeah. For me, it's the favourite time of the year for me.
Yeah.
We get to play around with literally hundreds and hundreds of these incredibly innovative projects, and we invite judges from pretty much all over the world to spend a week in what is actually a giant toy shop. Really.
Yeah.
We have
Christmas.
Interesting discussions around what is good design, what makes good design, what is good design today compared to 10, 20 years ago, and that to me is a really fascinating forum to be a part of, and really trying to unpick where is our world going in a way, and what role is design playing in that journey.
So when are the awards this year, and what are the deadlines for entrance?
The deadline for entry for the 2020 awards is the end of March, so
about a month to go.
A mad rush for everyone getting their submissions in to us, and then the awards ceremony is going to be held in Sydney in July. Have to come along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Black tie. That's when we get to celebrate all the winners and really profile the ones that end up winning the big top prizes.
Just in the last decade, what do you think has really stood out for you?
I always come back to, I guess, a way of helping me make that decision is designs that are actually solving a problem. If they're not at their heart solving a problem, I can't, and our judges do that as well. They're kind of, it's nice, it's beautifully designed, but it's actually not. It's not making our lives better. It's clutter. It's going to end up on in landfills somewhere. The one project that I keep on coming back to is a beautiful product called the SEABIN. This is two Aussie. One of them was an industrial designer who just had that kind of moment, like we're just designing plastic and it ends up in the ocean. And they came up with basically it's a filtration system similar to your skimmer box in your swimming pool that sits in marinas and harbours and just works on a skimmer box sort of principle and sucks plastic from the surface of the water. And they are scaling up at the moment. The product's been out there for a good couple of years. And to me, that's great design. It's innovation, and at the heart of it, it's solving a big problem. Is it going to take all the plastic out of the oceans? No, but it's going to take enough out, and it's going to actually excite people in a way that hey, maybe I could solve a problem like that as well. It's helping
to purify the oceans, purify the planet.
Yeah. Another product you mentioned, HIVE. I mean, how could you not love that? It's this is a complete revolution in the way that people keep bees, so and the design process that these guys went through was almost by accident that they came across a different way of cracking the actual hive itself without damaging the actual hive, without hurting the bees in any way.
All the larvae.
Using the principles of gravity, where the honey basically just flows down to the bottom and into your jar.
Yeah.
What's beautiful about HIVE as well is that, as we know, our bee populations around the world are actually in decline. Now, if that's a big problem. Is the HIVE going to solve that? No, but is it going to actually encourage more people to be beekeepers? Yeah, of course. So it's a beautiful product, beautifully designed. Again, it's intuitive, easy to use, and these guys are just doing fantastically well from a business perspective. Let me see, what else can I talk? I can't go past Tesla. They won our top prize Design Award of the Year in 2015. And at the time when electric cars were, it's 5 years ago.
They were real trailblazers.
Yeah, it was hands down from a design point of view, from a technology point of view. It just obliterated everything else in the awards that year because it's beautifully designed. It was incredibly intuitive.
I heard on radio a Tesla owner said it was like driving an iPad on wheels.
Oh, it's better. I can
better.
speak from that
As a
firsthand.
owner, right?
I have a Tesla, and it's the best thing that's happened to the automotive world forever, I think. And apart from the fact that it's a beautifully designed car, they're trying to solve a big problem, which is to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. And that's a worthy cause. Are they going to do it alone? They're probably not, but they are certainly doing everything in their power to get all the other automotive manufacturers to take notice of this. And I think, you know, you'll see in the next 5-10 years a massive shift towards electric cars. There's a beautiful little product that was entered a couple of years ago called the Lucky Iron Fish, you know, and this is
I remember
a really, really smart little
simple but
product
effective.
That's helping fight the
Iron
whole idea of iron deficiency
Yeah.
around the world. And I believe there's 3.5 billion people around the world that are actually impacted by iron deficiency. And if you don't have enough iron in your diet, you know, there's a whole bunch of health problems that then can fall from that. And they just nailed it in terms of using that empathetic part of design to understand the end user, and rather than actually having a little iron block and encouraging people to cook with this iron block while they're preparing a meal, they turned it into a little fish. And so this was a test case in Cambodia, and everyone thought, oh, if I cook with this little iron fish, it's going to bring me luck. You know, almost disguised as something that's going to bring you luck rather than it's going to make me healthy. Beautiful little product. It's now being distributed through the UN all over the world. And again, it's a design that's helping solve a problem. In this case, a really big problem. So, love it. And the diversity, you know, again, is something I come back to. It can be something as simple as that, or something as highly complex as as an electric car. So human beings are amazing, you know? And I always say we have the ability of putting a man on the moon. We can actually solve some of the big problems that are, you know, right here back on Earth as well.
They always talk about lack of this resource or that, but the one we hopefully will never run out of is brain power, which is what is driving all of this.
You know, I mean, we briefly spoke about AI and robotics and what's the world going to look like in 5 and 10 years' time. And
well, that's one of my questions here that I wanted to ask.
Everything is, you know, everything that can be automated will be automated. You know, any manual task that a computer can do faster and quicker, it's only obvious we're going to get them to do it, right? But
that's right.
The one thing, and hopefully we haven't taught computers how to do this, is creativity. As human beings, we have this ability to be creative, you know, and as children, you know, we're born with creativity. Unfortunately, I think we
snuff it out to some degree.
I think it gets bashed out of us as we grow up. But the ability to actually come to a problem with a creative mind, I think that's the one thing that's going to set us aside from computers and automation and AI and everything, you know, robotics. So I think, you know, for me, it only puts greater emphasis on the fact that something like design and creativity is really, really important. It's going to be much more important going forward into the future. You know, I think technology is just going to be a part of our lives, whether we like it or not. You know, it's going to be embedded in everything. I think that design's role is going to be, how do we actually make sure that technology is serving us rather than the other way around?
Yeah, absolutely.
How are we going to use clever, you know, intuitive, user-centered design to almost hide the technology, so we don't know that it's there, it's just doing what it needs to do. It's almost like electricity. You know, I don't really know how these lights are powered and how electricity gets here. I just flick a switch and bang, they're on. And I think that's what design needs to do in terms of blending technology into our lives. You know, we've got to, it's got to make our lives better. And you know, we briefly had a chat before. You can't really be, you know, live in a world where you're scared of technology. I think it's threaded into everything that we do, but it's got to improve our quality of life. You know, it can't be something that actually adds complexity, and it's got to be. At the end of the day, I think, you know, I've got 2 kids, and I just see how they adopt technology so quickly, and so there's a scary side to that as well. So we have to navigate our way through that and make sure that we end up in a world that's not
oppressive,
technology crazy,
or you know,
we don't
dystopian.
That we're actually human beings as well in the process. Designers, architects, that's another central thing. We have an optimistic view of the world. You know, it's
Yeah.
not all doom and gloom. We kind of approach, whether we're designing a toothbrush or trying to redesign the world, it's all like, how do we actually improve it?
Yeah.
We don't look at that toothbrush and say, how do we design one that's worse?
Yeah.
So that optimistic mindset, I think, is critical
Yeah.
in any designer, but it's actually, hopefully, it should be something that filters through society as well. You know, there's some pretty hairy things going on in the world right now. I think we all have to have an optimistic view as to the fact that hopefully something good's going to come out of all of this. I'll leave you with a beautiful saying that I love, and that good design solves problems, but great design prevents those problems from ever happening in the first place.
How cool is that?
I love that, right?
Yeah. Because you thought the extra step, you went the extra mile.
Yeah,
to avoid the problem.
You know, that to me is, if designers can have that mindset in designing anything, so how do I actually make sure that I'm driven to solve a problem, and if I get it right, you know, I actually prevent another problem from happening, and hopefully try and solve, you know, a big complex problem. You mentioned the World Design Organization that I was a part of for many years. You know, we took a complete shift in the way that organization was structured and its vision.
You redesigned it.
We redesigned it,
Yeah.
and we aligned it to the Sustainable Development Goals. It's the 17 global goals set by the United Nations. I like to call them the Sustainable Design Goals. And that was that whole thinking about, you know, having an optimistic, aspirational view of the world as a designer. Those goals might be unachievable, you know.
But you've got to reach for them.
But you've got to reach for them. You've got to have something that you're kind of pointing to. And so, if it's an overarching message to any designer or architect out there, have a look at those goals and say to yourself, if I'm designing a laptop or a new smartphone or a kettle or a toaster, you know, is it in some way trying to help solve one of those problems? If anyone's never seen the SDGs, go and check them out. I guarantee you, they're all design problems, and that to me is the bit that I'm passionate about, that I believe in, that gets me out of bed every morning, going like, there's an opportunity to throw design at all those sticky problems, and hopefully, you know, we get a chance to leave this world just a little bit better than we found it. Yeah,
well, like Steve Jobs, the dent in the universe, you know. And just to quickly finish on that, we spoke before we hit record on the camera about how design was about, you know, as you said before, avoiding problems from appearing in the first place. Less is more. You know, Apple talks about 1,000 no's for every yes. You're talking about how design is about simplicity. And
I can't agree with you more. You know, Elon Musk was very famous in coming out and saying that a product is doomed if it needs an instruction manual. You know, you should just be able to pick it up and know instantaneously how to use it.
Yeah.
That's not an accident. That's really, really, really good design, when you pick something up and intuitively you know how to turn it on, intuitively you know how to use it. You don't have to read a 163-page instruction manual. And a big part of that is actually knowing when to stop as a designer, not to over-design things, not to fill it with so many features that are just unnecessary. You know, and there's that saying that's like, you know, good design is as little design as possible. I love that, because that's exactly what that's about. You know, you really need to look, and you see it sometimes. You know, and I may have said this in our previous interview, that one of our judges said that joy is not accidental. You see somebody pick a product up and then they smile. You know, that little interaction, that little smile, that's been designed. Someone's thought of that, and you get a lot of products that are entered into the awards that have that magic. You know, and it's really, really hard to get that right.
Well, it's certainly a joy talking to you. It's inspirational, and I wish we could do this more when we can, you know. But look, I'm very much looking forward to the awards this year. Thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to the next time we speak.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.